This is Steve Laffey's Fixing America. And now, broadcasting live from the Fixing America Command Center in Fort Collins, Colorado, here is your host, Steve Laffey.
Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to December. Steve Laffey's Fixing America. I hope we have a good show for you today. Had a long hiatus from doing shows. Hope everybody had a great Thanksgiving. We did. We had a bunch of people over. Wonderful time. We did our Thanksgiving show last Wednesday. Ate a lot of cranberry sauce. As I mentioned, big lover of cranberry sauce. American-made cranberry sauce. Had next day, of course. Probably talked about the music playing throughout the house, the Christmas music. And by the way, to my friends my Jewish friends, Happy Hanukkah. I did not know it came this early. I was on the phone with a professor yesterday out of Boston. He was telling me it might not happen again for thousands of years, but it's that early for Hanukkah. I usually kind of expect Hanukkah around the 13th, 14th of December, give or take a week or two. So happy Hanukkah out there, belatedly. I should have welcomed everybody on Hanukkah also. And I had to go get a Christmas tree. So I went out. I take some kids with me. Took two of them and the little ones, and they weren't much help, actually picking it up. So the guy we bought it from, great tree. I bought the most gigantic Christmas tree. My buddy Boss, over there producing the show, he got a great Christmas tree. And he I didn't egg me on, but his tree sounded so nice that when I got out there, it really was too big. I almost couldn't get into the house. And now nobody can watch TV, which is not a bad thing downstairs. It's sort of blocking the whole TV, so they got to watch it on an angle. It's that ginormous. So maybe we'll do a live show from the Christmas tree as we get closer to Christmas. But we got a show. We got to talk to you about a lot of things today, but it really pertains to Iran. As I started getting ready over the weekend, there was a number of things that came to my mind. Iran's all in the news. Been in the news, of course, been off and on in the news since I was a little kid, right? And the hard thing, as I went through all my notes and started reviewing and studying a lot of this stuff, was to take a look back. And you go back all the way. 1979. We could go back to Cyprus the Great. We're not going to do that today. That's a 7-hour show. You only got 1 hour here with some commercial breaks. So you go back to the Shah of Iran and his fall. And that's sort of where America started really getting involved with Iran. We had been involved a long time, but not where people cared about it. And you look back on those hostages, and I think it was November of 79, right? They were in hostages for, it's an easy number to remember, 444 days. Americans were hostages, about 52 of them, I think 52. Some died in captivity. And of course, this really cost Carter his presidency in many respects. Remember the attempt to go get the hostages out. Of course, why we didn't take real military action, people held our hostages, that's the point. What if back then we had said, this is intolerable. We're not going to have our hostages. We went in and got them. Now, never mind the fact that our military was nowhere where it is today or where it's been since then with the Reagan buildup, for good or bad, mostly for good, but keeping our army so big and so many fleets of ships has been wearing on us militarily over the last 10, 20 years, setting it up to have so many troops. But when you go back to 79, you say, that was a real problem. Somebody was watching. The rest of the world was watching. China was watching back then. And what was the punishment? And this is, when Reagan became president, my understanding, and no one really knows, I guess, he put out word that, hey, it's going to be a deep, big problem for you when I get in office. And they released the hostages. And then what happened? Was anybody punished? I went through document after document. I don't think anybody was punished. So here's the first step in really that the people who perpetrated this what we thought was the worst thing that could happen. And we didn't, back in 79 when I was a kid, we weren't thinking about 9/11. We weren't thinking about other things. But what could happen in a country like Iran, that would be the worst thing. They take our hostages. Some of them died. 52 of them got out, I think, in January of 81. So it was a terrible, terrible time. But it's only gotten worse. Think of the next thing that happened. The next thing that happened was that Iran set up Hezbollah. It's a small little operation out of Lebanon. Today, Hezbollah, a state sponsored by Iran, terrorist organization dedicated to the overthrow of Israel, is parked Like someone said, I was reading like an aircraft carrier off the coast of Lebanon, pointed right at Israel. It's gotten stronger and stronger. And look at all the acts that they perpetrated. I mean, the list goes on, and we'll go through some of them. And you wonder why today we talk about Iran, talk about Iraq, talk about Syria, we talk about Lebanon with Hezbollah. And it's important to understand how these people in the Muslim world think about things. It goes back to Muhammad passing away, dying, 632 AD, I think. And one group of people, the Sunnis, he wrote down this name, I can't read it. They thought that the father of Muhammad's favored wife, Ashi, guy's name was Abu, he was the right guy to follow. Those are the Sunnis. And they've got like 940 million people roughly following them. The Shias, they thought, this is the split. I mean, all religions have a split on something. It could be Lutherans versus Catholics, whatever. But their split is one of these nonsensical, when you stand away from it, splits. But to them, it's the whole shooting match, right? The Hatfield-McCoy thing. It's the husband of the prophet's daughter, Fatima. His name was Ali. That's the Shia. That's really Iran. It's most of Iraq, 60% of Iraq. It's not most of Syria, but it is the Assad family in Syria who run it. And it is Hezbollah. So we call it the Shia crescent. If you looked at a map and kind of went like a crescent moon going around, almost not all the rest, but you can look through it. I mean, Afghanistan is Muslim countries, but that's sort of the split. The split, of course, goes on to this very day. And it's an amazing way to look at it, that they're split. But Iran is really at the point where it's about regime is about to fail, it looks like. And yet when we look all the way back, we just started talking about 1979. I got a list here of Iran's state-sponsored terrorism. And it's important to look through all the things that they've done. I guess we can't look through all of them. Some we don't even know. It goes all the way to, heck, you fast forward to 2011 here. We have a district court, rules that Iran is behind, or partially behind, not totally behind, that's the headline, the 9/11 attacks. So we know that Iran remained unpunished, even though George Bush talked about a friend of an enemy of a friend. We know that even up to 2011, that the findings of Judge Daniels here is that Iran and Hezbollah provided training to members of Al-Qaeda, among other things, the use of explosives to destroy large buildings. So you go from 1979, 1980, and all the events in between. And there's a lot of them, by the way. And it's, not that I forgot about them, but I don't think about them every day, and neither do you. But think about what was the impact of any of these state-sponsored acts of terrorism by Iran. We've went over the Iran hostage crisis. They returned the students and they went on with their way. They formed Hezbollah right afterwards. The U.S. embassy bombings in Beirut, April 1983, was the deadliest terror attack on Americans outside of U.S. soil into the U.S. Marine barracks 6 months later. So you go and take a look. U.S. Embassy, Beirut. Here's the response. U.S. government took no military action in response to the embassy bombing. There were some covert military teams that entered Beirut. They gathered intelligence, prepared for strikes. Nothing. What happened next when we did nothing? October 23rd, 1983. Bombing of Marine barracks in Beirut. One of my friends from business school was actually right outside of it and was luckily not killed. One of my section mates over there was a Marine. 4 months later, the Marines barracks, after the bombing, the U.S. Marines were ordered to stop pulling out of Lebanon. And these were backed by Iran. These bombings were backed by Iran. So you go back and take a look at these things. How about this one? Hijacking of TWA Flight 847. Flight hijacked en route from Athens to Rome to secure the release of fellow militants. Plane held in Beirut for 17 days. Hostage, U.S. Navy diver killed when demands not met. I remember when it happened. And now Robert Dean Stetham, Hezbollah responsible. Iran responsible. 1984, U.S. Embassy Annex bombing. 22 people killed. Hezbollah responsible. The list goes on. 1993 World Trade Center bombing. Iran was held directly responsible for the attack. That's the bomb. I'm talking about the bombing here in Argentina. 1994. I mean, you could go on and on. And this goes back a long time. The reason I bring it up when I go back and look at you just look back at some of the. Oh, by the way, this is the one I even pulled out his name again. CIA station Chief William Buckley was kidnapped on March 16th of 1984. He was killed in captivity. Hezbollah. So they set up a operation, Hezbollah, and we're going to talk about the coup operation, which is their combination of their CIA and Special Marines that are dedicated to targeting people like Americans. They've done this now through our war. We go through it all the way through. This is not even getting up to, we'll talk about it as we go along. Not even getting up to even really into the Iraq war. I mean, into our war with Iraq. But all the way along, there's attack after attack. Iran has a free hand. We do nothing. We do not. So what is their attitude? They obviously must think. I mean, if you're a little kid and you don't get punished ever for your atrocities, not little kid atrocities, but from, you got kids that don't ever get punished growing up. And what happens when they're teenagers? They don't know. And that's our situation in Iran. I was befuddled and of course these things happen a couple of years apart. So as I'm growing up, I mean, obviously for anybody my age or older or whatever, the Iranian hostage crisis was a huge deal. And we kind of knew we'd let the genie out of the bag. And then this militant Islam sect, the Shias out of Iran, they've been doing this all over. They've been killing U.S. soldiers. We know for a fact that they had munitions making up bombs to kill soldiers during the Iraq war. We know it, they know it, everybody knows it. What happened to them? Did we ever go in and take out the munitions factory? Among all the other things they were doing? Never. So what must be their thought process of a country with, 80 million people, by far, by the way, a higher middle class, more middle class people, higher wealth until we've crushed them economically. We'll get to this is why this problem with Iran is so big. But it's important to look back and say, how did it get here? What do they think about the situation? They think they're going to get away with everything. Why? Because they always got away with everything. Steve Laffey's Fixing America at LaffeyRadio.com. We love that you're following us on Facebook. But you know what? Someone over the weekend told me, he said, tell people about this show. LaffeyRadio.com. Steve Laffey's Fixing America. We put out a new Fixing America Presents this coming Wednesday. We'll put it out. We've got a Laffey blurb up today. Go to the website, check it out, and tell people about it. Thanks for passing along on Facebook. We appreciate it. We'll take a quick break. We'll come back and kind of look more at the present than in the past. And then we'll start looking at the future of our relationship with Iran. Steve Laffey will be right back.
Stay tuned. Steve Laffey's Fixing America returns after these commercial messages.
The call to serve. It has no sound, yet I have heard it in the whispered retelling of honorable sacrifices, made by those who have served before me. The call to serve has no form, yet I have clearly seen it. In the eyes of men and women infinitely more courageous and more driven than most. The call to serve has no weight, yet I have held it in my hands. I will commit to carry it close to my heart until my country is safe and the anguish of those less fortunate has been soothed. The call to serve is at once invisible and always present. And for those who choose to answer the call, for their country, for their fellow man, for themselves, it is the most powerful force on earth. America's Navy, a global force for good.
Students, when I call the reason for your absences throughout the years, please exit the auditorium without your high school diploma. Too tired, family trip, sick day, starting the holidays early.
Starting in the 6th grade, students who miss 18 days or more of school in a year for any reason will fall behind and risk not graduating high school. How many days of school has your child missed this year? Absences add up. Keep track at boostattendance.org. Brought to you by the U.S. Army and the Ad Council.
I'm in almost every school bus and classroom. I go to school with your children. We say the Pledge of Allegiance together. You see me around the neighborhood and you tell me that I'm a pretty good kid. Well, I'm one out of every 5 children in America, and I'm struggling with hunger. This problem is closer than you think. My teacher tells me we can grow up to be whatever we want. I want to grow up to be someone who doesn't go to bed hungry.
There's enough food in this country to feed everybody.
Please visit feedingamerica.org today and find your local food bank for ways to help. Every dollar you donate helps provide 8 meals for kids like me, quietly struggling with hunger. Together, we are Feeding America, brought to you by Feeding America and the Ad Council.
And now, back to the Fixing America radio program with your host, Steve Laffey.
What was concluded in Geneva last night is not a historic agreement. It's a historic mistake. It's not made the world a safer place. Like the agreement with North Korea in 2005, this agreement has made the world a much more dangerous place. I know that many share the concern of Israel, especially in the region, and there's a reason for this. For years, the international community has demanded that Iran cease all uranium enrichment. Now, for the first time, the international community has formally consented that Iran continue its enrichment of uranium.
Wow, that's Prime Minister, leader of Israel, man who's fought in a couple of wars, Benjamin Netanyahu of Israel, talking about what a disaster it is. It's a historic mistake, he calls it. And he makes this important point, what Steve Laffey here talking about Iran, talking about the recent developments with a new agreement. It's not really a treaty. It certainly doesn't remind anybody of any treaties we've seen in the past, where usually you write down people shall do this and they will do this. Instead, we have, could you please do this, it looks like, in some of the agreements. And we'll go through that. But Netanyahu, it puzzles me. The last 10 years, it puzzled me. I'm obviously not, I'm not in the U.S. Senate. I'm overseas, not overseas hardly anymore. But it puzzled me for years and years that Israel would continue to wait and wait as if the U.S., and they thought a better deal would come along as Iran got closer to a nuclear weapon. Did they think a better deal would come along when Barack Obama was elected? I mean, that time period between the election of Barack Obama in 2008 and when he took office was full of, as you know, almost no concern for foreign policy. There was a meltdown in the finances. The big banks were getting away with figurative murder. GM was getting an illegal bailout. People were just grabbing for the money in America. And I actually thought that would have been the time for Israel to make some play. And I know that we can go through, it's a very difficult play for Israel. But we now know, looking back, that Saudi Arabia, remember Saudi Arabia being the Sunnis, against the Shias, and they have an awful hatred of each other. That we know that they want Israel. They wanted Israel to fly over their airspace to take out these reactors the best they can. And the argument always comes up that it's like, to push them back 3 or 4 years. And I'm like, 3 or 4 years is good. Seems like now this treaty put it from 6 weeks to 9 weeks. I mean, we're at the point where Iran is about to make, and no one knows for sure. Remember how fatally flawed intelligence is. And I'm not just talking about our intelligence. How fatally flawed intelligence is. From any war you look at, from anything George Washington might have received through today, and including the Iraq War, the weapons of mass destruction, how fatally flawed. So we don't really know. Anything I'm saying here is not, it's more than conjecture. But when Powell can get up as a Secretary of State and say there are weapons of mass destruction, and Hillary Clinton can get up and say, I'm convinced there's weapons of mass destruction. Of course, they take it back later. How do we know where they stand? How do we don't. We don't know where Iran stands. What we do know is that it's a very, very dangerous situation for Iran to have a nuclear weapon. Because they say they want to use it. They say they want to wipe out Israel, and whether they do or not. I remember being at an AIPAC conference in 2007. And I never forget, a guy came in, gave a lecture. It was, by the way, they ran an unbelievable conference. American-Israeli Political Action Committee, sometimes accused of being too strong of a political action committee. But when they run a conference, man, you could put them in charge of the state of New Jersey, and they'd clean that place up in a week or two. They know what they're doing. I never saw anything so well run in my life. And I run things pretty well. I mean, this was good. But I never forget a guy coming in, and I forget where he came from. But he came and said, listen, it's not that Iran, if they get the weapon, is going to have a rocket. The most likely scenario is not that they get a rocket. They fly it up in the air and it lands in Tel Aviv. That's not the scenario. Scenario that ought to worry everybody is that a dirty bomb goes off in the Negev desert, and you can't live anywhere for miles and miles around, and nobody takes credit. And that got me thinking, that's, or they sell it. And that must be everybody's worry. But when it's everybody's worry, and you kind of know what's going to happen, and we're going to go through the agreement. The agreement is crazy. Bad situation for America. Bad for our allies. Bad for looking at, this whole thing is spun out of control since this whole thing with Syria. I mean, remember, Iran props up Syria. How do they prop up Syria? Why do they prop up Syria? Well, they're allies. The Assad family is the Shia side. And there's no real freedom-loving rebels out there. There are rebels that, who knows if they're better or worse. It's like in Libya. Better or worse? Really? Like they were better? But you have a situation where Barack Obama, the president, he's up there. He loved the Arab Spring. It turned into a total disaster. I mean, the military had to remove the Muslim Brotherhood president of Egypt. Of course, we won't call it a coup. So this thing is spun out of control from the issues of why we didn't go into Syria. It didn't physically go in, but we told them they couldn't cross the red line. And there's nothing but American weakness. And so it's like they showed up for the negotiation because we crushed them economically. I mean, look at what we did so far to Iran. These sanctions were not going to all the sanctions. And, of course, there's ways to cheat on the sanctions. But they must have really hurt. It effectively wiped out their middle class. It's going on for years. Now, do they smuggle gasoline out through Iraq, their Shiite brothers? Yes, of course they do. But for them to come to the negotiating table, they must be literally worried about whether their regime can survive. Because if Syria goes down, Hezbollah goes down. Take a look at the map. And so we got them where we want them. Finally. I mean, it's at the end of their nuclear program. They haven't quite finished, so we think. We got another $70 to $90 billion outside the country that we can confiscate looks like. We can add added sanctions. The people we have working with us, we've added these sanctions. And right at the cusp of victory, the only thing I can think of, and of course you have to just think, if John Kerry's doing one thing in foreign policy, since the Vietnam War to today, you ought to be doing the other thing. Whatever he's doing, I mean, he's 100% wrong. Can't think of anybody who's been more wrong in foreign policy as the present Secretary of State. The only person you might think of who made it worse was Hillary Clinton. They really didn't know what they were doing. And so you've got a situation where we're right at the cusp of victory. But back to the bumper clip. Netanyahu must know this. He's no dummy. He's been stood up by this White House. He knows that he's been dissed by them. They obviously have a strategy of getting away from Israel. Getting away from Israel, in some respects, for the Obama administration, get to what? Who's left? You're not talking about Canada versus Mexico. What's left in the area? Now, we know that Americans are getting out of this part of the world, and we're shifting toward China, not shifting in a very effective way, shifting toward the Pacific, pivoting, or whatever the term that's used today. But we can't leave the place in total disarray with Iran with a nuclear weapon. And you could walk down the street here in Fort Collins, Colorado. You could get in a car and start driving. There aren't many people who would say, it's a pretty good idea. Most people understand the dangerous nature of leaving them with it. But what I don't understand, if I had 10 guys I'd like to have lunch with in the next 10 years, it would be the leader of Israel. I'd just like to know what he really is thinking. I mean, 2006 they didn't do enough when the war started coming out of Lebanon. So did they not? Are they just all talk, or is the situation developing where Saudi Arabia and Israel are actually? It's hard to believe this would happen, but over Iran and a nuclear weapon. Because once Iran has a nuclear weapon, Saudi Arabia is going to have to get one. Everybody's going to have one. Outside of Pakistan already has one. And so it's not something that I understand. It's not something I understand. But look at what's happened in the last several years. Go back 10, 12 years. We know, and that's why there's another name you have to know, another name that doesn't come up in the news all the time. Rouhani is the new leader of Iran. There's also a guy named Soleimani. I don't even know what a picture this guy looks like. He runs the Quds Force, Qud. Some people pronounce it differently, but Quds is what I'll say. That's their that's their special forces. That's their attack dogs. Those are the people that they literally take in to boost Assad. This guy's been doing it for years. In fact, he is so strong. Iran is so strong with their Quds Force. They were the ones directing deaths of U.S. troops in Iraq. I mean, there are many people who think, there's an article I have in front of me that talks about how they really installed Maliki in Iraq in 2010, that they were responsible, that Soleimani, who for 15 years has run the Special Operations Forces, the guys, who are behind Hezbollah, the guys who just go in and commit assassinations, that he called in the Kurds and the Shia of Iraq and said, here's the deal. We got to get rid of all the American troops. Now, the American troops were going out supposedly anyway, but all of them had to go out. And that's a deal he got to get Maliki in power. We know for a fact that today, that Iran, through the Quds and their paramilitary forces, flies planes right over Iraq, through Iraqi airspace, and that's the route they use to back up Assad in Syria. Anyway, we got so much to cover. I got so much more to cover. I got to get more specific in the next segment. It's Steve Laffey. Steve Laffey's Fixing America. We're talking about Iran. We're talking about the danger of this new treaty and how really foreign policy in America has really fallen off the rails. We'll be right back.
Stay tuned. Steve Laffey's Fixing America returns after these commercial messages.
Well, I finally did it. I opened a 401k.
What? Why? Just wait for the inheritance. We've definitely got a rich uncle somewhere. We're one call away from the winner's circle at the Derby, dinners with multiple forks, a vacation home in the country, using summer as a verb.
You don't actually think that. do you?
When it comes to financial stability, don't get left behind. Get tools and tips for saving at feedthepig.org. This message brought to you by the American Institute of CPAs, the Rhode Island Society of CPAs, and the Ad Council.
When I have an asthma attack, I feel scared. It's like tiny nails in the air poke my lungs. I start to cough. Sometimes my parents have to take me to the hospital.
Today, 1 out of 13 children suffer from some form of asthma, accounting for nearly 1/3 of all emergency room visits.
I feel like I'm choking. It's kind of like an elephant is on my chest. A little whistle sound comes out when I breathe.
But while your child may suffer from asthma doesn't have to make your child suffer. There are simple ways you can prevent your child's next attack. To learn more, log on to www.noattacks.org or call your doctor, because even one attack is one too many.
I feel like a fish with no water.
Brought to you by the EPA, the Ad Council, and this station.
I am an American soldier.
I'm a warrior and a member of a team.
I serve the people of the United States and live the Army values.
I will always place mission first.
I will never accept defeat.
I will never accept defeat.
I will never quit.
I will never leave a fallen comrade.
I am disciplined.
I am disciplined.
Physically and mentally tough.
Trained and proficient in my warrior tasks and drills.
I always maintain my arms, my equipment, and myself.
I am an expert and I am a professional.
I stand ready to deploy, engage, and destroy the
enemies of the United States of America in close combat.
I am a guardian of freedom and the American way of life.
I am an American soldier.
I am an American soldier.
I am an American soldier.
There's strong, and there's Army strong. See what it takes at GoArmy.com.
And now, back to the Fixing America radio program with your host, Steve Laffey.
I've said before and I will repeat. We do not want Iran having nuclear weapons. And it would be not only dangerous to us and our allies, but it would be destabilizing to the entire region and could trigger a nuclear arms race that would make life much more dangerous for all of us. So our policy is Iran cannot have nuclear weapons. And I'm leaving all options on the table to make sure that we meet that goal.
Wow. He's doing just the opposite. Stephen Laffey's Fixing America. That was November 15th, Barack Obama giving his speech. Iran cannot have a nuclear weapon. No nuclear weapon for Iran. They're doing everything in their power, et cetera, et cetera. And they're simply not. I mean, let's go. I mean, we've got to go through some of the things that they've done. What is happening? What happened in the Geneva Agreement? Well, Iran is going to freeze its nuclear program for 6 months. It's got 19,400 centrifuges and 2 uranium enrichment plants. They make sure that they're not going to expand that. They got 9,500 centrifuges that are currently standing idle, and they're going to stay idle. That includes 1,008 advanced machines, which will stay out of commission. They've got some enrichment up to 20%. That's close to weapons grade. They're going to turn it into oxide, harmless oxide. Of course, it can just be reversed, put back into highly enriched uranium. Bottom line, we could go through all this stuff. The verification is the International Atomic Energy Agency. We really obviously don't know where these places all are. We think we do, but we don't. But even over here, and that's why it surprises me, even the Washington Post, usually carrying the water for all the Democrats. I mean, it's the Washington Post, owned by the guy from Amazon now. They go through and say what the White House didn't report. There's an op-ed from them a couple of days ago. So the text of the second of the accord makes several major concessions to Tehran on terms of a planned second stage agreement. The White House officials and Secretary of State John Kerry repeatedly said that Iran's assertion of a right to enrich, quote unquote, right to enrich uranium would not be recognized in an interim deal. The text of the document says the comprehensive solution, quote, comprehensive solution will involve a mutually defined enrichment program with mutually agreed parameters. In other words, the United States and its partners have already agreed that Iranian enrichment activity will continue indefinitely. In contrast, a longstanding U.S. demand that an underground enrichment facility be closed is not mentioned. That's it, folks. They're going to keep enriching. When this deal comes down in 6 months, they're going to keep enriching. It is a stated goal. They call it a fatwa, like a religious ruling. Gets back to the Shia, looking up to the imams, that looking up to the religious leaders, that they have to have a nuclear weapon. That's their whole stated goal, and they've done an amazing job of avoiding all kinds of retaliation through actively fighting against us in the Iraq War, which we never touched them. Through recently, just think of the recent stuff, and just think, you have to, when you're going to negotiate with people, you have to understand, like, you're going to look at their whole life. When I do a deal, when I've done deals, I want to know the background of the person. I wonder if they welched on 7 other deals, so I don't have to get involved in the next deal, so they can welch on me, right? Other than that, we wouldn't have contracts in America, right? We'd just be shaking hands still, which would be great if we could, but we can't. And we can't, it's basically what we're doing with them. Allowing them to continue this program and only setting back, as some people think, maybe 3 weeks. And this is the point. I mean, we have a situation that just 2 weeks ago, our sanctions were so good and they could have been better. But the National Iranian Oil Company declared bankruptcy. I mean, we were making them hurt. Why do you think they came to the negotiating table? And listen, if we just put more sanctions on them, we have a situation of reversing sort of the Shia crescent. We have a situation where they are struggling so badly that if we handled Syria correctly, that we could take out Hezbollah by taking out Syria and getting that situation under control. It could stop backing up on Iran. And when that happens, they're in deep trouble. I mean, we're allowing them $7 billion, but already, by the way, what starts to happen? Iran deal opens door for businesses. Today's paper. Businesses, how are they going to undo this again? It was so hard to get it done. And then you go, I've got so many clips here I want to share with you. I haven't played any of them. Let's go to clip 3. This is Barack Obama. About verification. This is like last week.
Architecture in place, keeping the core sanctions in place, so that if it turned out during the course of the 6 months when we're trying to resolve some of these bigger issues, that they're backing out of the deal, they're not following through on it, or they're not willing to go forward and finish the job of giving us assurances that they're not developing a nuclear weapon, we can crank that dial back up. So we don't have to trust them. What we have to do is to make sure that there is a good deal in place from the perspective of us verifying what they're doing and that they're actually moving in the right direction.
There's Barack Obama. That's him talking about the fact that they can just turn this around. And it's, you would have to think that the Obama administration, I mean, they just snatch defeat out of the jaws of victory all the time. And they're making us weaker everywhere. But this is the most dangerous one at short term right now, that Iran is this close. And it's gotten to the point, and we were talking about this before the show, it's gotten to the point where not just Barack Obama, just about a lot of people in politics, I mean, we know that Iran just says anything. They'll say one thing in the meeting and say another thing when we could play you clips all day long, but then when they get back home and say, no, we didn't agree to that. Right? We're still going to do this. America, by the way, the Iranian guards, they still, their motto is death to America, right? They have a day about the day of the hostages taking, where they celebrate taking the American hostages today. So it's going to be very difficult, but we had them so close. And then you go over here to, let's play Netanyahu again. He differs substantially about what the sanctions are going to do. Let's listen to that.
Iran is taking only cosmetic steps, which it could reverse easily within a few weeks. And in return, sanctions that took years to put in place are going to be eased. Iran is going to receive billions of dollars worth in sanctions relief. So the pressures on Iran are being lifted, they're being eased. And with the lifting of this pressure, this first step could very well be the last step. Without continued pressure, what incentive does the Iranian regime have to take serious steps that actually dismantle its nuclear weapons capability? Why would it dismantle the centrifuges and the plutonium reactor? None of this is covered in the agreement. They're left intact. So Israel is not bound by this agreement. We cannot and will not allow a regime that calls for the destruction of Israel to obtain the means to achieve this goal. We will not allow Iran to have a nuclear weapons capability. Israel has many friends and allies, but when they're mistaken, it's my obligation to speak out clearly and openly and say so. It's my solemn responsibility to protect and defend the one and only Jewish state.
And then you have to wonder, there's the opposite. He knows how difficult it is going to put these sanctions back on. He knows how close they were. And I guess Israel must be sitting there today saying, gosh, we were patient. And now what do we do? It's a long way from Israel to Iran. The Iraqi, by the way, look back at this. We look back on all the, we should have brought in some clips of this, but back in 83, so I remember 83, when Israel took out the Iraqi nuclear plant, people screamed. I mean, the UN went crazy. About 3 weeks later, I don't remember Iraq building another nuclear power plant. Do you? Does anybody? So when they met with strength, they buckled. Iran has been the biggest bully. I mean, the most effective bully. I mean, we got North Korea as a bully. They got nothing going on there. A couple of nuclear missiles, and they just kind of, every once in a while, just, I guess China tells them to send off a missile or do something to South Korea and then focus the attention on them, and then we portray them as a crazy uncle, and then we forget about it for a while. But these people in Iran, I mean, think about what Barack Obama didn't do. Think about what Hillary Clinton didn't do. Back in 2009, June 12, 2009, the Green Revolution in Iran starts. We did nothing to help them. In fact, I don't know if I have time. I have to wait till after the next break. But I've got to play the clip of Hillary Clinton. We've done nothing about this, and it's almost like we, the people, have been fooled from administration to administration talking about Iran, and now we're at the point where it's actually happening, and our government's actually okaying it. Now, by the way, there is always a situation in history where great enemies somehow become friends. You can go back throughout history and find people that had alliances, and we can find a core alliance with different people. And I think we could find with Iran due to their middle class, which we've crushed, I mean, monetarily, but due to the fact that many people in their country has shown in the 2009, 2010 Green Revolution, which the Iranians crushed, which we could have helped them out. When we tried to help the Arab Spring, we tried to help the situation in Libya, all led to disaster. We weren't willing to help the Iranian middle class, the pro-Western side that's in there, rise up. What a disaster. Anyway, Steve Laffey's Fixing America, talking about our lack of foreign policy as it pertains to Iran. We're on Facebook at Laffey Radio. Tell your friends about the show. It's an unusual show. And pass along some of these clips we put up. Fixing America Presents one will be up Wednesday. We put up a new Laffey Minute this morning, and those go up every day, and we got a Laffey blurb out there. So Steve Laffey, take one more break. We'll be right back.
Stay tuned. Steve Laffey's Fixing America returns after these commercial messages.
Picture this, your next trip, Utah, 5 national parks. First, Zion. You're walking, the ground rises, the ground drops, the ground becomes water. Next, Bryce. You're riding a mule. You're riding a mule under giant orange strip castles. You are not dreaming. You will not forget this. On to Capitol Reef. Take the scenic route, the really scenic route. Take a path you've never taken and see the stars for the first time. Now for Canyonlands. You're riding a bike. You're riding a bike on Mars. Now you're riding the rapids. Class 2, Class 3, Class 4, Classic. Arches, 5:32 a.m. Some things are worth racing the sunrise for. The horizon lightens. You round the corner. Whoa. This is Life Elevated. The Mighty Five. 5 iconic parks, 1 epic experience. Plan your trip at visitutah.com.
This is Nnamdi Asamoah. I play football for the Philadelphia Eagles, but what I do off the field with United Way might be more important. I'm a volunteer tutor and mentor. Why? Because over 1 million kids a year drop out of school, and that's not okay. It takes 12 years to create a graduate, but it takes about the same time to create a dropout. And the difference between a child becoming one or the other could be me, or it could be you. Studies show that if we get to these kids earlier, their chances are better. And kids who read well by 3rd grade are more likely to graduate. So join me in United Way. Suit up and take the pledge. Become a volunteer reader, tutor, or mentor. Because when a child succeeds, we all succeed. Give, advocate, volunteer, live united. Take the pledge at unitedway.org. Brought to you by United Way, the Ad Council, and the National Football League.
I'm always up for a challenge. It's the feeling of accomplishment that drives me. And there's no better challenge than serving part-time in the Coast Guard Reserve. I protect my country, work with the best and brightest, I get great pay and benefits in return. The Coast Guard Reserve is important work. I get to serve my community, and it's always rewarding.
If you were born ready, there's a new challenge waiting for you. Learn about serving part-time at gocoastguard.com/reserve.
And now, back to the Fixing America radio program with your host, Steve Laffey.
Of course, I would make it clear to the Iranians that an attack on Israel would incur massive retaliation from the United States. And we will let the Iranians know that, yes, an attack on Israel would trigger massive retaliation. We are not going to permit them, if we can prevent it, from becoming a nuclear power. But were they to become so, their use of nuclear weapons against Israel would provoke a nuclear response from the United States, which personally I believe would prevent it from happening.
Steve Laffey's Fixing America. We could play that 3 times. There's so much in that little clip we just played. That's Hillary Clinton. That's 2008 running against Barack Obama. You notice the words, if we can prevent it. Steve Laffey here talking about Iran. And it's the attitude of these people that we've let in power. And by the way, George Bush didn't do anything about this either. Nothing. Whole Iraq war. I don't know what he was thinking when Iran was using their efforts and their people to kill American soldiers, our soldiers. And I can't imagine, you look back at all the stuff that Iran's done from 79 on. It's not millions of people, but there's thousands of people whose lives were affected. And they must look around and go, yeah, my husband was kidnapped and killed. Nothing happened. Yeah, my father was taken hostage. Nothing happened. Yeah, my on an airplane that they hijacked, my relative was killed. Nothing happened. So we've got Iran, and then we have Iran thinking nothing ever going to happen. Why wouldn't they think that? Nothing's ever happened. And you got Hillary Clinton, who's only surpassed by John Kerry as the worst Secretary of State we've ever had, it looks like, who's talking about if we can prevent it, not we will prevent it. And I guess it may simply be that in America today, whether it's the state pension systems, Social Security, the financial problems, our foreign policy, we will not have anybody attack these issues head on and get to the core of the problem and say, here's how we're going to fix it. I mean, how could it be that they had these sanctions on for so long and made them work to the point where Iran came to the table? And then we said, oh, well, let's just give them $7 billion of money. Instead of putting more, if they had come to the table with me, we put more sanctions on. We drive it home that you've got to dismantle everything. Take it down. Board it up. It's over. You're not having a nuclear power. You're not having nuclear weapons. It's over for you guys. And then that would have been the signal to have the Hezbollah, Syria, even back to Iraq, Shia crescents start to fall. And that would be a singular strength to America, to Americans, but also to our allies around the world. Unlike every single we're sending out today. The reason we've done so much on foreign policy is that it is critical now. I mean, everything's critical. I mean, we'll be doing shows. I mean, yeah, they're getting ready for that budget deficit agreement pretty soon. Looks like. I don't even get me started. I got to keep starting. I got to stay on this subject for the next 10 minutes. But let's go back and play Hillary Clinton again. 2009, she's a Secretary of State. The Green Revolution starts. It's our one chance for the freedom lovers. And we know, by the way, unlike the situations in Libya or even today in Syria, where it's a bad situation, the rebels aren't freedom lovers. They aren't people for democracy. But many of the people in Iran are. That's the difference. That's why we could find a situation, if we used our strength and kept these sanctions on, to turn Iran effectively, to overthrow the people who had destroyed their economy, destroyed their country. We could find a way. But here's Hillary Clinton discussing why we did nothing to support the Green Revolution in 2009 when we had a chance to.
We're too slow to condemn what seems to have been fraud in the elections, too slow to offer support to people on the ground.
We knew that if we stepped in too soon, too hard, the attention might very well shift, and the leadership would try to use us to unify the country against the protesters. Now, behind the scenes, we were doing a lot. As you know, one of our young people in the State Department got Twitter to, keep going, despite the fact that they had planned for a technical shutdown. So we were doing a lot to really empower the protesters without getting in the way. And we're continuing to speak out and support the opposition.
That's Hillary Clinton saying that they did a lot behind the scenes, and the only thing she mentions, someone tweeted something from the State Department. I mean, you want to laugh. And then, of course, I played the whole clip of that in the whole interview. The reporter doesn't ask anything like, what do you mean? What would you say the other six, where was the CIA? Where were the pamphlets? Where was the American behind the scenes movement? We could have done a lot more. And maybe at that critical time, we could have turned the tide in 2009. From June 12, 2009 through the rest of that year, there was an opportunity in Iran, and we did nothing. That should have been a signal. It was a signal to Iran. It was another signal. Stay the course on the sanctions, right? Just stay the course. And finally, when the national oil company declares bankruptcy, do people not see that because they don't understand business, not see that when the national oil company declares bankruptcy in Iran, which is full of oil, means that they're not getting enough smuggled out through Iraq, that they really are in a hardship, and they're really on their knees begging for some solution, that's the time to take it to the next level and turn the screws and say, our ultimatum is this. You will dismantle these plants. And we've got another $80 billion we can grab from you. We're gonna do even more to make sure that in fact, we're gonna take away some of this humanitarian relief if we have to. With the food, probably, half of it probably gets traded out. We know one thing about humanitarian efforts. Half the stuff doesn't get there. Go take a look at Haiti today. Take a look at the way they live after that last earthquake. All the humanitarian efforts, all the government money and so forth. So there's more we could have done. And that was a time to turn the screws even farther, show our strength without having a real fight. And we might have gotten it done, and we could have got it done in 2009. But their attitude must be, let's make them stronger. Let's make our enemies stronger and our allies weaker. I mean, right now, we're not doing anything about China. It's communist policies and about what they're doing with trade. We don't do anything about Syria. We're letting the Russians handle it. We're not doing anything about Russia as far as what we can do in the Ukraine, in Poland, what we did with those interceptor missiles. And what have we done to our allies? Besides, just the physical nature of sending the bust back to, the bust of Winston Churchill back to the Great Britain, just to tick them off. It's amazing. And there's some clips that you can't even believe actually exist. Here's one literally from October 25th of this year. Barack Obama, where is he? Yeah, you got it. He's at a fundraiser.
This weekend, together with our allies and our partners, the United States reached an agreement with Iran on a first step towards resolving our concerns over its nuclear program. Now, some of you may recall that when I first ran for president, I said it was time for a new era of American leadership in the world, one that turned the page on a decade of war and began a new era of our engagement with the world. And as president and as commander-in-chief, I've done what I said. We ended the war in Iraq. We brought our troops home. Osama bin Laden met justice. The war in Afghanistan will end next year. And as the strongest, most powerful nation on the face of the earth, we've engaged in clear-eyed and principled diplomacy, even with our adversaries, in order to begin to destroy Syria's chemical weapons and to place the first real constraints in a decade on Iran's nuclear program. Because I firmly believe in what President Kennedy once said. He said, let us never negotiate out of fear, but let us never fear to negotiate. I believe that. And this diplomacy, backed by the unprecedented sanctions we brought on Iran, has brought us the progress that was achieved this weekend. For the first time in a decade, we've halted the progress on Iran's nuclear program. Key parts of the program will be rolled back.
Yeah, I want you to hear the clapping for that at the fundraiser. I mean, all happy. Yeah, wow, great job in Iran. We're not rolling anything back. A couple of weeks. We're letting $7 billion flow into their economy, and gosh knows how much more, really. We don't really know, by the way, that if you read the documents carefully, while they will stop doing things at certain facilities, we don't know where some of the other facilities are. It doesn't say they can't continue at another facility. Why do we think we know where everything is in Iran? Why do people think that their foreign intelligence is always so perfect when we know for a fact it's not? Why don't they read the intelligence with a more caustic view about what's really going on in Iran? No. It looks as though, as we look at it today, that Barack Obama and the lead, somewhat to the leaders before him, but he's the worst on this issue, are going to allow Iran to get a nuclear weapon. They're going to keep going and keep going. Iran's been a masterful at this, avoiding any kind of punishment, physical punishment. We do have these sanctions against them. We should have kept them up. And take a look, by the way, before we get off the year here. No, I don't have time to play it. I'm out of time. But when Rouhani was elected in July of 2013, what did he say? His major allegiance is to Assad, is to Hezbollah, is to Hamas, who rule the Gaza Strip. So if he's the moderate one, when he goes back from the agreements, he goes back and tells the world, it's in print, that basically, no, we're not slowing anything down. So if both parties came to the table and the allies, the P+1, and we see here P+1, you're talking about the 5 members of the Security Council plus Germany. Germany did a lot of trade with Iran. They came to the table wanting an agreement. It was time for an agreement. Iraq came to the table and they wanted nuclear weapons. Well, I guess in that sense, everybody wins. But man, we are going to rue the day, and Israel's going to rue the day, that they hadn't taken action earlier. And there was an opportunity for everybody to take action many, many times directly against Iran. And we used to do shows about fixing things. We need new leaders. And by the way, don't even ask the Congress or the Senate to help. They don't seem to be helping at all. I mean, there's no mass movement. There's no mass movement anywhere. Maybe on this show, but there's no mass movement among Americans to say, we got to stop this. This is very dangerous. They can take a suitcase bomb once they get it, and they can move it around the country easily. Anyway, Steve Laffey. Steve Laffey's Fixing America. We appreciate you listening in. We'll be back tomorrow with another show. Check us out at Facebook at Laffey Radio. We're at www.laffeyradio.com. We'll be back tomorrow with another show. God bless you. Take care, America. Bye-bye.
You've been listening to Steve Laffey's Fixing America radio program on the Laffey Radio Network. Fixing America is broadcast Monday through Friday afternoons at 3 p.m. right here at www.laffeyradio.com. Any rebroadcast, retransmission, or account of this broadcast without the express written consent of Laffey Network, LLC is prohibited.